We're here in Southfield, Michigan, just outside of Detroit, talking with CEO Ryan Maibach of Barton Malow. Ryan?
Hey there. Good to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. So, Ryan, how does it feel to be 100 years old when it comes to Barton Malow?
Well, I'm only half of that myself, but yeah, as an organization, it was really fun in 2024 to be able to celebrate that. I mean, I think that club of being a century plus is pretty unique, increasingly more common in our industry, which is great. I think it speaks to the longevity of the industry, but we had a really fantastic celebration. Of course, there's so many moments that gets you to that milestone and that point, and it was really fun to celebrate the present, but honor so much of the past and the really rich history that we have.
Now that you've entered the 100-year-old club, how do you keep the company feeling young? How do you stay so young?
Well, I think it certainly helps to be in a pretty dynamic industry. I mean, it's a very competitive industry. It's a fantastic industry. And you constantly have to be working to ensure your relevance. I mean, we're competing for projects all the time, and you need to be pushing yourself to be able to ensure you can add value. And so that inevitably, ensuring your relevance is absolutely going to keep you young and in the moment.
Now, I'm a Detroit native, and so Barton Malow is a name I'm familiar with. But I know that Barton Malow has been recently really advancing beyond the Midwest. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. I think Detroit is home, and so it will always be that special place for us. And we're incredibly proud of 100 years of history and impact. But increasingly over time, we have had opportunity to expand those horizons. And it's fun, when you go back and go through some of the archives and understand a bit more of your past. I think it even really helps to inform the present in so much more. And so that process of beginning that celebration for 2 years ago, our 100th in 2024, really understood that actually that geographic expansion has been underway for quite some time. It goes back to an acquisition that was made 50 plus years ago and ties into the growth of certain markets. We did the Pontiac Silverdome in Detroit in the early 70s, and then that led to a project in Minneapolis, the Metrodome, and then really sports became a catalyst for a lot of geographic growth and expansion. And then other markets coincided with that. And so it's definitely been a journey. I think it's good to have diversification in the market niches that you work in, and certainly as well the geographies, because as we know, there are natural ebbs and flows and highs and lows in the different types of work that we do. And so you want to be a part of a balanced organization that can sort of sustain those highs and lows. And so geographic expansion is certainly a big part of that.
I'm going to ask you a question about Barton's leadership. When it comes to leadership, you are correct me if I'm wrong, the fourth leader in the family, is that right, over the company?
So my family's history, my great-grandfather started with the founder, Carl Barton, back in late 1924. And so he was a carpenter foreman, and my grandfather joined, had opportunity to be able to buy into the business. That was a couple decades later. But I'm the third leader, third family member, if you will, that's had the opportunity to lead Barton Malow. There were a handful of non-family leaders over our history as well. But it's actually coming up on 15 years in April for me in this role.
That's interesting because, when there is that opportunity, I know you stepped into the president CEO position, that was 2011, is that correct?
2011, I think, was president, later took on the CEO title as well. But it was not a planned transition. It wasn't necessarily anticipated at the time. And it was definitely a pretty big change for me at the time.
What is the process when it comes to that, the opportunity for transition comes up? What is the process that you're thinking about when you're deciding whether you want to step into this role, or do you want to bring someone from outside of the family to lead the company for a bit, or what's the process like?
Yeah, I think that, succession planning and that intentionality is certainly very important. And I think that there are times when organizations can do that well, and times where maybe you take your eye a little bit off the ball and maybe have some challenges with that. And I think that was maybe a phase in time where we weren't as intentional, and it led to an unplanned transition. And so my predecessor had an opportunity to do something else, left relatively unexpectedly, and there wasn't a great succession plan in place at the time. And so there wasn't a lot of decision making. It was a relatively short conversation.
Okay.
Called into the boardroom and said, "Hey, congratulations, you're now president." And it was definitely a surprise, I think, to me and to the organization at the time. I'm very thankful and grateful for that opportunity. But definitely, two things can be true at the same time. I mean, it worked out relatively well, but probably not the best case or the best case study, if you will, on what leadership transition should look like.
So, well, now that you are the leader and leading the company, how have your impressions of the business changed? Because I know that you grew up working in the company, and I know that, sort of being a part of staff and employees can feel a little bit differently when it comes to your impression of the company and the business. But now that you're at the top, how has that changed? How have your impressions of the business and the way that you handle business challenges, would you say?
Sure.
How has that changed?
Well, I think I'll start off, if it's okay, with maybe how it hasn't changed.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that attracted me to this industry is that I'm, of course, biased, but I think that we work in the coolest industry because we have this really tangible outcome from the work that we do. And it's often, years, decades of lasting impact. Everything that we do is really built for a purpose, or our clients, if you will, are investing in what we do and what certainly our peers in the industry do. It's creating a new facility to heal people, to educate people, to convene people, to cheer on their teams. And so to be able to go and participate in your work afterwards is really exciting. Going to a concert at Little Caesars Arena this weekend, and it's just still several years after we completed that project, it's still a source of pride to go in and be a part of that. So that hasn't changed. I felt that as a kid growing up with family in the industry. And so it still gives me a lot of excitement today. It's just, I think, one of the neatest parts of the job. Yeah. I think what I've grown to understand that much more is how really incredible the people are that work in our industry, and all of the really unique talents. Certainly our trades, very proud of the fact that we have been, we've self-performed, had a base of skilled trades really since our founding. And the incredible talents, not only the ability to execute work in the field, but where those talents can take people outside of work, and some of the different hobbies and interests and passions is really exciting. And it's just it's a great industry that's made up of just some incredibly diverse and talented people, and it's really fun to be a part of.
Excellent. I imagine with a 100-year-old company, you have this sort of resource, 100-year-old data, right? You have all this documentation that goes back to the beginning. And I imagine when it comes to planning for the challenges that you foresee today, but also for the future, perhaps you can go back and see, okay, well, it's not as bad as when this happened in the past, or it's not as bad as, there's been a laundry list of things that have happened and when it comes to business that companies have overcome. So what do you do with that data as a leader? How are you able to learn from that, if at all, or what's your relationship with that history and using that to inform your decisions?
I think great question, and I would maybe take it through a couple of different layers. One, there's just a layer of experience, if you will, and that may not fit the bill of data proper, if you will, the way we often think about data. But there's institutional experience, and certainly the collection of individual experience, but just what you as an organization have gone through. And it's great, very fortunate to have work with a leadership team that's been in place for quite some time, and individuals in this room as well that have been a part of the organization for a long time. That all helps feed into some institutional data. None of us are machines. None of us can remember all of the things that we've experienced. And so there's tremendous power when you get a group of people in the room and reflect on what has been and how that relates to the current moment. I'm very fortunate to work with some great people that can help do that. But to more of a, I think a technical definition of data, we have 100 years of history, and whether that's financial history, market trend history, we do look back at some of that macro picture a fair bit, but more of the near term, even the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years of data. I think ourselves, much like I would imagine many of our peers are really wrestling with how to organize that data and marshal that data to our benefit. And that's not an easy task. I think the first time that I heard about the concept of data governance many years back, it's like, oh, that sounds like just terrible and boring. But I mean, you realize how important that is to be able to really derive the full measure of benefit from our data. And so we've made a ton of progress, and we're beginning to see a lot of the fruit of that. We still have a long ways to go, but I think us, along with our peers in the industry, when we get to that better place of us collectively organizing our data, there's enormous power in that. We have a real challenge as an industry to overcome a lot of the well-documented challenges to productivity that we have as an industry. And I think being able to leverage that enormous pool of data, I think will be a really key part of helping us add better value to society and to our clients as we work to overcome some of those productivity challenges.
On the subject of data, and that's a very honest answer about data governance, but on the subject of data, there is, of course, artificial intelligence and the sort of rise of data center projects, right? They're popping up all over, mega projects across the country. How are you, when you look at things like artificial intelligence and incorporating that into your company in a way that is useful, what questions are you asking about that technology, or any technology really, when it comes to incorporating that into the company?
I think we could potentially fill the balance of this podcast with all of those questions and all of the implications. I think, first and foremost is, what does that do to the human experience? And, we just got done talking a little bit earlier about how one of the more rewarding things in the industry is the interactions and the relationships that you build up, the teams that you structure to often accomplish these Herculean tasks in the projects. Never do you have a project that has too much time or too much money to complete. And so you're really leveraging the power of collective wisdom and experience and teamwork to be able to overcome that. Now we've got a new partner, and that partner might be a handful of different names. It might be Gemini, it might be Claude, it might be whatever tool different organizations are using. And so how does that fit into that dynamic? Obviously, it's incredibly powerful. I mean, the things that I've been able to do just in my role, but then also just personally in life. I mean, the utilization of these AI tools are remarkable. But it's absolutely going to change how we experience and interact in the workplace. And I think it's, as with any change, there's probably pros and there's probably some cons. If we have this significant productivity enhancement tool, what are we going to do with a lot of that productivity improvement? Do we work the same amount and just work harder and are more productive? Are we able to curtail that a bit? I think balance in our industry is a real challenge. I mean, we have projects that I think increasingly the norm is 6 days a week, oftentimes 7 days a week. Are we able to realize some of that productivity improvement to increase the quality of life for our professionals, skilled trades, project team members, all the above? I hope so, but I think it's definitely going to be a fascinating journey. The change management around all of that, I think, understandably, some of the concerns that people have about how is this going to impact my job? Am I going to have a job? I have 3 college-age kids, and we talk about that. What's going to be on the end of this college career? What's the job market going to look like? And those are really understandable fears and concerns that people have. And so it's, as a society, I mean, there's no industry that's not asking some of those questions and trying to navigate what it means, it's going to be a pretty fascinating few years.
It's been almost nonstop fascinating few months for us this year when it comes to policy changes at a federal level, when it comes to sort of really trying to position. I've talked to several company heads about them trying to really position their companies for the busier construction season and really get a handle around some of the federal policy changes when it comes to tariffs and supply chain disruptions. And now we're seeing different disruptions caused by global conflicts as well. When it comes to Barton Malow's strategy around some of those policy changes, how do you ensure that Barton Malow can continue to show up for its clients and continue to deliver for its clients despite the sort of, I don't want to call it chaos, but despite the shifts in policy that are happening around federal level?
Yeah, I think, very fair to say that businesses generally enjoy a relative consistency and stability. I think that's true for us in our industry. It's true for our clients. When you think about what our clients are doing, for any of us, regardless of project size, often to them, that's a very material number, 7 digits, 8 digits, 9 digits, sometimes even greater, that they're spending in creating these new spaces. That's a really material investment for them. And so what they want is a level of confidence and certainty in the outcome, the cost certainty and the schedule certainty.
Certainty, yes.
And it's difficult when there is an ever-changing regulatory environment and policy environment. And so, I wish there was a better answer, but I think for any of us, understanding what you can control and what you can't. You can control and influence the supply chain that you're tapping into to be able to ensure that consistency or certainty to the best that you can. But oftentimes it's trying to make sure that you have the mechanisms in place to be able to quickly react to what the changes are and have a handful of scenarios as to how it's going to impact us directly, impact our clients, and impact oftentimes our suppliers. We have taken on, really through COVID, an increased responsibility to be a source of information and direction for a lot of our really key trade partners as well. And so, I think we've definitely learned some things through experiences with COVID and dealing with uncertainty that are certainly applicable and helpful to us today as well.
Today, what would you say is the number one challenge in the construction industry?
I think the number one challenge in the construction industry is not necessarily new today, and I think it will continue to be a challenge that we wrestle with for years to come. And it really does get back to, the growing volume of data that suggests that there's a lot of need for productivity improvement. And ultimately, productivity is kind of one component, but really if you level up from that, it's how do we deliver better value for our clients? In relative dollars, the cost of construction and the inflation in the cost of construction grows at a more rapid rate than what traditional consumer inflation does. And that's been that case for a long time. And so, when you look at how significant the industry is as a percentage of GDP, not just in America, in the world, and the same trends are happening around the world, there's got to be a better way. I think we are stewards of our clients' investment and really a societal investment in the built environment, and we got to do a better job of ensuring the value commensurate with that responsibility.
I'm going to turn it on to Barton Malow. What would you say is the number one challenge at Barton Malow?
I think the number one challenge for us right now is a challenge or an opportunity, and I think potentially the two can be the same. Really navigating what is the multiplicative impact that AI can have, and how do we do that in a way? How do we leverage the benefits and all of the tremendous opportunity that exists, but in a way that's very consistent in keeping with the 100 years of culture that we've worked to build up, and we have a lot of pride in. And it isn't entirely unique to us. I think many other firms in our industry embrace a very people-first mindset. And so how do we provide our team members the tools that the full gamut of these incredible tools that are becoming available to us, but being very thoughtful and sensitive to how that can be an enhancement to culture and not a detriment to culture.
Excellent. As CEO and president, what is your view on company growth when it comes to sort of like the organic development of headcount and that sort of organic expansion versus doing mergers and acquisitions, right? Acquiring and really sort of like that shake and bake growth, right? Where you can purchase a company and then increase your headcount very quickly and increase your stake in a particular market. What is your view when it comes to one growth over the other, one strategy over the other?
Sure. Well, I think growth in any organization and in any industry is important because it forces you to do new and different things, and it also is very helpful in providing opportunities for your people, your team members, because as an organization grows, people grow with that. And but there's a relative pace, and that's got to fit into a much bigger ecosystem of ownership and ownership expectations. What do owners look to get out of that return on investment? It gets into available cash at any given point in time. Right. It gets into risk and appetite for leverage. There's a whole lot that fits into that. But I would go back to, I think, a really important thing for us, and something we've learned over the last several years, is the good and the bad that can come with just even organic growth. We were, being here in Detroit, we were very fortunate to be at very close to a tremendous amount of investment that was happening in the EV space over the last several years. And it was exciting to be a part of projects that were of size and scope that I don't think I ever would have contemplated, would have seen in the entirety of my career. Yeah. And they were exciting to be a part of, but definitely the rapid growth in the organization and the size and sophistication of projects created some unique stresses for us in back to culture and the impact on people. And I think it's made us think about organic growth a little bit differently as well. That we of course want to grow, but we want to better manage what that growth looks like to ensure that we can not create again those undue stresses and challenges for our team members. We're certainly not perfect at it by no means, but I think we as we're looking at another really pretty tremendous opportunity for growth, and the pipeline today is very, very strong. We just want to be much more thoughtful and much more judicious on what we take on.
When it comes to Barton Malow's expansion and portfolio of work into different states, how do you've mentioned Detroit a number of times, and I've mentioned how much Barton Malow has made such a name in Detroit. How do you recreate that sense of community? Because it's not just the work that Barton Malow does, but it's the type of work and it's the way that Barton Malow does it in the community that is known so well. And so how do you recreate that in other states? I know you have projects in Colorado and across the Midwest, but is there a particular state where you see that sort of becoming a second home, or you're actively really recreating that formula that you have here?
Yeah, we're fortunate that we do have pretty consistent fixed bases of operation, offices, if you will, in many locations throughout the U.S. And I think that what's great about this country is that every city, every state has its own local flavor, and it has an impact on the construction industry. How you go about doing work in Baltimore versus Charleston is, of course, similar in how you hang drywall in many ways the same way, but the particular trade jurisdictions, what the history and the legacy is of that particular market to be effective, you've really got to understand. And I think the more that you can understand it, you can really embrace all that market has to offer. And you can, again, do similar things no matter what. Any town that we operate in, there's that same sense of pride for the places that we've been a part of helping to create. And our team members that are there share that same sense of pride and excitement. And so, here it might be kind of here in Detroit, it might be one laundry list of type of projects that's kind of reflective of what the spirit of Detroit is all about. For other locations that we have offices, it's different. So we're very fortunate we have a board member that often speaks to how in his prior organization, it's one culture with different personalities. And I think that, we want to really accomplish the same thing. Each of our different geographic bases has a little bit of a different personality, and that's okay. That's celebrating, the uniqueness of that particular geography.
Speaking as the president and CEO, and this is my last question I have for you, but speaking as the president and CEO, what do you, in thinking about the large, right, the enormous contractors we have in our industry, but we also have some very well-known local contractors as well. What do you think makes a good, when we talk about, they're a good contracting company, they're a good partner, that word good has a lot of connotations in it, right? So as president and CEO, tell me what makes a good partner for Barton Malow, but also what makes, when you think about Barton Malow, wanting Barton Malow to be a good company, what's loaded in that thought for you?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I'm also kind of bummed. This has been a fun conversation. You said this is the last question, but good, to your point, can be very relative. Right can be relative, and so one thing that we spend a fair bit of time internally doing is looking up the meaning of words. It's important to know what is it that we're saying when we're using a particular word. But I think to your question, what we're looking for in partners, and true with clients as well, is trust is so important in this industry. And are you a trustworthy partner? And then are we being trustworthy, if you will, to you? And I think that no matter what, there's absolutely a role for contracts, for a lot of the associated due diligence, for process, but ultimately it really comes down to do we have confidence in your character and your competence? If you kind of break trust down to one layer below, it's do you operate with integrity? Do you have the relevant experience? Are you competent in doing what it is that you are doing? Can you back up what you say you're gonna do? And it's wonderful when you've had experience with firms and you're able to build up that level of trust over time. We're fortunate in that we have multiple joint ventures happening now with firms that we've been working with in one case for over 30 years. And so there's a lot of history. There's multiple leadership transitions in both firms over that period of time. And so when you can really create that depth of relationship and depth of partnership, it's really powerful. But trust has to work both ways. We have to be a trustworthy partner. We have to do what we say we're going to do. We're not perfect, and we also need to make sure that when we're not, and when our partners aren't, that there's an ability to, with a measure of grace, to be able to, talk that through.
That recourse, yeah.
Sometimes there are companies that, for whatever reason, it doesn't mean that they're not good or not good people, but maybe that's just a little bit more of a struggle or a little bit harder. And there's those are the ones that you don't necessarily want to work with again.
Just to follow up to that, 100 years from now, when we look at when people are looking at your era as CEO, looking at Barton Malow's 200-year history and looking at your era as CEO, what do you want that era to be known for? These can be words, this can be innovation, technology. What do you want people to really understand about your era of leadership?
Oh boy, that's a bit of a challenging question. I mean, well, I guess first off, I mean, hey, I don't want to be the one that runs it into the ground, number one. So hopefully,
Obviously.
we're able to survive whatever era that is. But I think that part of being human, I think we can kind of live in the moment and say that this is a really unique moment in time. And I think history has shown that there have been a myriad of unique moments in time. But two things can be true at the same time. This is also a really unique moment in time, and how technology is going to have the potential for a really dramatic impact on our industry. And so, I think it'd be great to say that we were able to navigate that really well and do so in a way that really honors and values the individual and the power of human potential in all of that. So we took a very human approach to the embrace of technology, ultimately to really better our industry. I think that would be really tremendous, not only for us, but I think for the industry as a whole.
This has been ENR Groundbreakers with Ryan Maibach, CEO of Barton Malow. Ryan, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much. Enjoyed it.